Welcome back to Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton, and we're going to go a little bit further down south on this episode. We're going to talk to a guy that covers the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, yesterday coming off a 13-6 loss to the Houston Texans, and I had to get an eyewitness account on that. So I want to introduce you all to a guy named Mr. Demetrius Harvey. What's going on, man?
Nothing much, man. I'm just living the life, I guess, and coming off that 13-6 loss by the Jaguars. It was a sight to see, to say the least.
I bet. Now, of course, for those that aren't aware, John Reed used to have the same position that Mr. Harvey has, but now he is stepping into those great and wonderful shoes. John is still a friend of the show, still a great guy, still a person I love chatting with, and I have to chat with soon. I had chat with in a minute, but definitely uh, excited and glad to have you on, and glad to see another brother come in and take his place, man. To keep more Black people in media, man. Love that. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
yes, sir. I appreciate that. Yeah, John was a great, I would say mentor to me. During my time before I was with the Times Union, he used to tell me, the little tips and tricks that he's learned over. He covered the Pelicans in the NBA. He covered the Jaguars for a long time. So it was just great to be able to hear from him, and just in terms of his history and all the knowledge that he could share with me. So obviously I have a lot of respect for John Reed, and I wish him well. He's doing his dream job, as a teacher now down in Jacksonville. So I'm really excited for him, and I know that this is something that he's wanted to do for a while.
Definitely. Now, of course, can you give everyone a little bit of background of your history, so kind
Mhm.
of get everybody up to speed to where you are now?
Yeah, so I basically, started covering the Jaguars, near the end of the 2017 season. I wasn't necessarily in the building at that time or anything, just kind of light blogging, just trying to, figure out if I even wanted to do something like this, if I wanted to write. I didn't really necessarily go to school for journalism. I went to school for something completely different. But over the time when I was in high school and partially in college, I did write a little bit just to because I enjoyed sharing my opinions and talking and doing all that kind of stuff about not only the Jaguars but the NFL as a whole. So I sort of went into it that way. Wrote for Locked On Jaguars for a couple of years, and eventually became pretty much the lead writer, or one of the lead writers at Big Cat Country. It was at that time when I sort of got my way into the building, got my way into the locker room, started conducting interviews, doing all that good stuff, and just started building from there. Over the past few years now, covering this team. And then the gig opened up when John Reed retired, and I was able to apply, and I sort of got my way in there that way. So it's been a pretty long journey for me. I've basically just been grinding for the past, I would say 5-6 years, something like that. And I'm so happy for myself. And then just for it to come to fruition right now, covering it for the Times Union, something that I grew up reading when I was little. So it was a long journey, but I'm excited that I'm here.
So you're saying you're a Duval born and bred
Mhm.
person, correct?
Yeah, well, I not born, because I was born in Japan because my dad was in the military, but
Okay.
for the most part, yeah, I consider myself, Duval, raised. Obviously,
Mhm.
I've been in this city for pretty much my entire life, so yeah, I know the city intimately, and I know this team pretty well just watching them. I mean, they're the only team that was on CBS, growing up, so watch them a ton, and now I'm here.
Here we go. There we have it.
Mhm.
Now, of course, the energy was high in Jacksonville yesterday. Of course, they're 2-2. They're coming off a close loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, which many consider the best team in the league right now.
Mhm.
Um, then they come home. Of course, they got the Tony Vaselli celebration of the Hall of
Mhm.
Fame. Thinking, you got the Houston Texans. We can go in there and do our thing, whatever. Then the game happens, 13-6. What was the feeling after the game in terms of the locker room?
I think it was a feeling of disappointment. I think that they're hurting. They're they're mad that they gave up, a golden opportunity because the defense played well. They only gave up 248 yards. They had that run at the end of the game by Damian Pierce, who kind of just shrugged off, like, I think it was like 7 defenders for the Jaguars. So that was sort of deflating for them, I'm sure. I talked to Shaq Griffin after the game, and he sort of said, defense, we did our job. The team as a whole has to be able to come together and sort of do everything right. They wanted the leaders to sort of step in from the defensive side to get with the offensive side, and it's just sort of a setback, but I didn't really get a sense that this was, oh man, that's it, that's the season sort of feeling. It was just more of boom, they had to sort of wake up a little bit because after that Eagles loss, you could tell that there was a feeling in the locker room of, they lost, they were disappointed, but the conditions were terrible. They came, toe to toe with who I think many would consider the best team in the NFL right now. And then they lost by only 1 score. So it was a feeling of, hey, we lost, but we got this. We're still good because they were still coming off of those 2 great victories over the Colts and the Chargers. So it was just a sort of different feeling this time around because I think they're even more disappointed than they might have been last week. But I don't necessarily think that it's a feeling that's going to linger the entire season. I think that this team is different, and we'll probably get into that, under Doug Peterson.
Got you. Okay. Now, of
Mhm.
course, one person that hasn't really performed well the last couple of games, that would be
Mhm.
Mr. Trevor Lawrence. The last 2 games got 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions and 4 fumbles lost. I
Yeah.
mean, is there a concern with his last 2 games within the building?
Um, Within the building, no. I think that they believe in Trevor. They know he's a second year player. Doug talked about it right away. I mean, they believe in him. They have to get a way. They have to figure out a way to settle him down. They think that he's doing well. Considering everything that he's done the last couple games. I think that they have a shorter memory than probably fans do, and fans sort of have a very, um, you know, pinpoint memory in terms of, hey, the last thing I saw was Trevor Lawrence did not play well. So it makes sense that there's a lot of loss in belief in him and in that regard because the past 2 games have not been good. He missed a lot of throws. He threw the interception to Stingley, which the guy was he was there the whole time. Trevor said that he sort of backed off of him, but really he was there the entire time. So it's a situation where I think that Trevor needs to still grow and develop himself. Last year he had a terrible season because of what was going on around him, and then obviously his play on the field too. So I don't necessarily think that the team as a whole has lost any faith in him. I think that it's a long season. It's only week 5. I think that there's a couple other 2 and 3 teams, the Rams being one of them, that probably shouldn't be 2 and 3. I think that the Jaguars are a team that is still rebuilding. So I don't necessarily think that that's something to lose faith completely in Trevor, but yeah, it's something to consider. Hey, how good can this guy be, and what can they do to sort of make it better for him?
Yeah, definitely. And one
Mhm.
guy that was brought in to make things better for him is Christian Kirk. He had 1
Yeah.
reception for 11 yards. And man, our team's starting to kind of scheme and game plan for him now since he kind of got off to the hot start.
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I wouldn't necessarily say they are, specifically going, hey, we need to make sure we do this and that against Christian. I'll have to go back and sort of look at the tape again to see what the Texans did that was so, drastic from what other teams have done. I think that the last week, the Eagles game, it was just terrible conditions. I don't think that was set up for most receivers to have any good day. But this week for sure, Lovey Smith put in together a really, really good game plan against the Jaguars, but he didn't do anything fancy. He just played his cover 2 sort of scheme, and something that he's done, his entire career. Tampa 2 cover 2, whatever you want to call it these days, and they got downhill. They attacked the middle of the field. There were some open spaces, I'm sure, where Christian might have been able to get things done, but otherwise, they sort of limited him in the best way that they could. I think he had around maybe only a few targets and then just the one catch. So they didn't target him very much. They sort of, went away from him. They used the tight ends a little bit more. I just think it was like a combination of, hey, the Texans have a good game plan against Trevor, and the Jaguars sort of game planned to not necessarily go away from Christian, but to target the other guys a little bit more.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, of course, we do have to talk about the defense. The defense kept them in the game, as you mentioned. But of course, you do have those runs from Mr. Dameon Pierce, and the previous games, the Eagles went to town on the ground too. Now, previously, I have been known to call the Jaguars the team that is a donut. Now, let me describe what that is. Solid on the outside, but nothing in the middle, which teams could attack, and run and do whatever they want to do between the tackles. I'm not saying they're that this year. I don't think they are. But does this give people a little bit of a cause to concern about the last couple of games where they've been attacking the running game?
Yeah, I don't know if necessarily it would be a huge cause for concern, just because Pierce was good. He had his runs, but they limited him to just 99 yards. I know that sounds like a lot still for just one back, but they didn't really have many rushing yards outside of that. I felt like they did a pretty good job of him, especially in the first half of the game, to sort of limit how effective he can be. But Damien's a great player. I actually forgot to mention when we were introducing me. I used to cover the Florida Gators over the past 2 years too. So I know Damien pretty well, and he's been that guy ever since my first time at Florida. And for whatever reason, Dan Mullen decided not to ever use him. But getting away from that, the the Jags run defense, I feel like it against the Eagles, they were definitely missing their gaps. I think they were trying to play too much on Jalen Hurts. I think he's a guy who can run around. He'll scare you. He's a guy who doesn't use his legs maybe as much as Lamar Jackson, but he's like in that middle where he's going to use his legs as often as he wants. And so they had to sort of account for that. They had a spy. Devin Lloyd was spying him for a lot of the game. And then this game, I felt like they had a pretty good bounce back. They were missing one of their key players, Foley Fatukasi, who they brought in through free agency in the spring, and I think that was sort of something that set them back because if you don't have your pretty much your stud player in the middle of the defense, to your point, they can have a huge hole. So I think that it was just a mix of missing him, and then at the end of the game, you just have to bring down Damon. You have to go low on him, and they clearly were all going high, and it just didn't work out. So I don't necessarily think that it's too dramatic of a scare, because the first 3 games of the season they were playing pretty well, 55 yards per game on the ground. Just the past couple games, and mainly the Philly game, where they sort of just couldn't get it done.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So, of course, the Jags up next, they have a familiar foe. That would be the Indianapolis Colts. So, of course, they beat the Indianapolis Colts down bad in Duval. Now they have to go to visit them at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. What do you think they need to do offensively to kind of, I guess, keep the upper hand on the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, I mean, they have to be able to pretty much do what they did during the first game. They, they sort of limited themselves. They didn't try to do too much. Trevor was turnover free. I think that's the major key. Whenever the Jags have a turnover, they tend to lose the game. I mean, and that's sort of how it goes with almost every team, but specifically the Jaguars. They're so young where they can't really make a mistake. And once they do make a mistake, it seems to sort of snowball from there, and that's sort of on the leaders on the offense to sort of step up, make sure that this doesn't snowball, say, hey, that drive was whatever. They turned the ball over. They didn't get the 4th down conversion, whatever it may be, to end the drive with 0 points, but they have to get better. They have to do things the right way. I think that another thing they need to do is start running the ball more. Last week, or this week, Sunday, sorry, they had Travis Etienne, I believe, had 6 carries for 60 yards in the first half. He looked like he was going to have a huge game. And he still had a pretty good game with like 80 something yards total, maybe 90 something yards total with the receiving. And yet during the second half of the game, they barely went to him. At the very end, they did just out in necessity, but overall, I think he had around 3 or 4 carries in the second half total. So you have to be able to get to a point where you're playing within your team, not necessarily the system you want to run. So maybe if a guy is having a good game, perhaps you just should hand it off to him. It doesn't matter if he's starting to get 2 to 3 yards a clip. Eventually he's going to break out, because that's sort of the game that he's going. You have to establish the run. So a lot more of that similar situation, where I think that the Jaguars are pretty good against Gus Bradley's cover 3 sort of system. I think that the tight end is going to play a major role. Evan Ingram, he's going to be able to get his catches in that system. So it's just a situation where they can't turn the ball over. They need to run the ball and sort of get the tight ends involved.
That's definitely a guy that I was going to mention, Evan Ingram, and also another guy I mentioned, James Robinson. To be honest, I like Travis Etienne, but I would say that when James Robinson's playing well, the Jaguars are playing well, and 10 carries, that's not enough for him, to be honest.
Nope.
Defensively, of course, they did play one heck of a game. Of course, despite with the highlight that's out there about Dameon Pierce, but what do you think they need to do this game to kind of, again, keep the upper hand on the Indianapolis Colts?
I think, especially defensively for the Jaguars, they need to get pressure on Matt Ryan. They were able to do it during their first matchup. They were able to force a lot of bad throws by Matt. I think they caused 4 turnovers total with the fumble and then the 3 interceptions. So basically getting back to that, you need to be able to get pressure on him. I don't think the Colts offensive line is very good. I think that they've been playing poorly. I know they have a couple of young pieces there. The left tackle is brand new. The right tackle is sort of new. So you have opportunities to create pressure with Trayvon Walker, with Josh Allen. They played them before, so they should know how to attack them a little better. The same will be said on the Colts side. Obviously they're going to be looking for blood, because they want to attack this Jaguars team. They want to show that they aren't a team that's going to get shut out by the Jaguars. I get that. But I do think that the Jacksonville defense just this year especially, they have a knack for getting around the football. And I think that that's something that they're going to have to do a good job of next Sunday in order to beat the Colts. It's a huge matchup. This is a division that's very winnable from all teams, honestly. And so, this is a big game for them.
All right. Well, you've answered all my questions I had going into this week, and of course what happened this past week with the Jaguars. The only thing left is a game. We got 5 questions. We got 2 answers. We got 1 choice. Are you ready, Mr. Harvey?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
That sounds like I'm on Family Feud talking about Mr. Harvey, but that's another story. Let's see. Of course, I'm gonna bring up past Jacksonville Jaguars quarterbacks: David Garrard or Blake Bortles. Which one you taking if you want to win a game?
David Garrard. I think that he's able to control the game a lot better than Blake. I think Blake will turn it over. So David.
Yeah, Blake was a guy that gave you great fantasy stats when you were down. Basically,
yes.
that's what he was. But
yes. Exactly.
All right, going in the past Jaguars wide receiver room: Jimmy Smith or Keenan Mcardle. Which one are you taking?
Ooh, that one's tough. I'm gonna have to go with Jimmy. I think that through the course of his career, I remember growing up watching him, just an electric player. He was one of the best players for this franchise. A should be Hall of Fame wide receiver. So I think I'm gonna go with Jimmy there, but Keenan's really close, of course.
All right, now we've got running backs. Of course, I probably know what your choice is going to be here, but we got to go with Fred Taylor or Maurice Jones-Drew. Which one are you taking?
God, that one's tougher than you think. MJD, when I was growing up watching the Jaguars or just the NFL in general, he was so much fun to watch. Fred Taylor, obviously, his history, another guy who should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm gonna have to go with Freddie T, but it kind of hurts because MJD's my guy. So
I hear you. All right. Going to go along the defensive line. We got Tony Brackens or Big John Henderson, who is from Nashville, by the way.
Ooh. Tony Brackens or John Henderson. Now, John Henderson, fantastic player, run stopper. He can get after the pass as well. Him and Marcus Stroud were really fun to watch. Tony Brackens or John. I'm going to go with Big John Henderson. He's just more fun in my opinion in terms of the iconic slap video. It's always fun to see that one. So I'm going to go with Big John Henderson.
He's from Nashville, Tennessee, and he
Mm-hmm.
actually went to Pearl Cone High School, which produced Santonio Beard, who played played for Alabama and played in the NFL
Mm-hmm.
as well. So yeah, they've produced a few people, and of course I don't know how much you follow college basketball, but Ron Slay, he actually went there.
Okay. Yeah.
They all were there around the same. They all were there around the same time, which is crazy.
That's amazing. Yep.
Yeah. Let's see the last one. All right, you kind of touched on it a little earlier, but I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up again. Which one has more of the impact in the next game versus the Colts? Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram, who had 6 receptions and 69 yards in the game against the Texans, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Evan Ingram. I just like that matchup against a Gus Bradley cover 3 soft zone sort of system. I think that's a matchup they're going to have to exploit. And Christian Kirk might get his, but I think that Evan's going to have the big breakout game for the Jaguars this week.
All right. Well, that's my questions. 5 questions, 2 answers. 5 questions, 2 choices, 1 answer. We're all wrapped up there. We're all wrapped up with this episode. I want to thank you for coming on, Mr. Demetrius Harvey. If you would take the floor and tell everyone what you're working on, where they can find you on social media.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you you having me on. By the way, you do a great job, and I'll hope to be on again soon. Just in terms of finding me, just at Demetrius82 on Twitter. That's the best way you're going to find me. Honestly, I don't think email is very effective anyway. So just at Demetrius82.
All right. And definitely we'll be looking forward to more Jacksonville Jaguars pieces coming from you. And thank everyone for tuning in. You've been tuned in to Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton. We're out.